Hello and welcome to Faith and Books, and I've figured out how to have books as a backdrop. I'm very excited. This is our bookshelf in our master bedroom that we had actually built in a few years ago when we sort of rearranged the whole setup, and I love it. Um, and I figured out how to use it as a backdrop. I've got everything set up now. So I'm excited about that. I'm still not feeling very well. I've still got a sore throat, and I happen to be sipping tea in my Mickey Mouse mug that the little 4-year-old gave me for Christmas. But I'm really not feeling so well today. I was hoping to do fun things with him after I picked him up from his preschool. I have a little bit of free time this morning. Because he needs a Halloween costume, and I'm trying to find one secondhand because I'm very anti-plastic and I want to be a zero waster, even though I'm not. I'm very cluttered, but I'm very attracted to that sort of environmental style, environmentalist. For me, it's about faith in God and being grateful for creation, and we should be good stewards and all that. I'm very motivated by that to try to live more gently on the earth. And so I wanted to go to this very neat and large thrift store near us and look for either a Halloween costume, he wants to be a tiger, or for, things we can use to make our own Halloween costume. But I don't know if I'm going to be up for it. I might have to pop some Tylenol, and I might have to see. I might have to decide when I pick them up at noon. Anyway, I wanted to make this a quick video and not ramble on too much because I wanted to talk about my 4 maybes in the favorite authors tag. And I feel I'm being rude. Like, I don't think I quite have the protocol of BookTuber down. I'm supposed to be linking to other BookTubers and acknowledging them in the when I participate in a tag or any kind of challenge, and I'm not very detail oriented, so I haven't been doing that well. Also, I don't really know how to tag people, or not tag them, but list them in the comments. I haven't quite figured that out. I'm not very techie, and I'm very new to YouTube, and I'm very intimidated and shy about doing things. So I think I have to ask maybe my son to help me figure those things out. Anyway, with no further ado, I'll go into my 4 maybes for the favorite authors tag. So I did a previous video about my 6 not quites, and this is a continuation of the tag. I'm breaking it down into 3 different videos. So my 4 maybes are Elizabeth Gaskell, Charles Dickens, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and G.K. Chesterton. And maybes, the maybes category in my mind is sort of an alternate category. The alternates, like if you're picking people for a team and you had alternates, those would be people that would come in and fill in. And that's what these 4 authors are for me in terms of my favorites. Elizabeth Gaskell, do I have one of her books back here? Well, anyway, I won't bother to pull out books. But Elizabeth Gaskell, I think I've read pretty much everything she's written. I've loved it, and I've reread several things. I remember I'd never heard of her before the 1990s, but at that time I was homeschooling, and I was in a Yahoo group of women. The group was called Trivium Pursuit. So it was a play on Trivial Pursuit, but it was about classical education in the home. And it was a bunch of really smart ladies who were much more structured than I was. I tended to be more relaxed and unschoolish, but I wanted to have an atmosphere in the home with a lot of read-alouds and a lot of intellectual inquiry and chances to explore and learn about the world and that sort of thing. So I was much less structured than they were. I didn't really go for the pedagogy kind of thing, but I liked the using classical education as sort of a backdrop to create an atmosphere of learning. Anyway, I really liked these ladies. It was a really fun Yahoo group, and I can't even remember when I faded away from it. It was really good. But anyway, one time, one of the ladies said, I just read this book, North and South, and I can't figure out whether I like it or not. Anybody want to read it with me again? So we did. And, at first, the only North and South book I had heard of at that time was by that guy, John Jakes or something. He wrote in the 70s, maybe. It was about the Civil War in the United States. But this was North and South by by Elizabeth Gaskell. And we read it together, and I loved it. I still think, every time I read it, I think that the ending is a little abrupt, and she didn't quite tie things up the way she ought to. But I did read it before the miniseries came out that made it much more popular. And the miniseries is very good. I acknowledge that. I acknowledge that, what's the guy who played Mr. Thornton, Richard Armitage or something, is extremely handsome. But they changed certain elements of the story, which, somehow it still works, but the editing and some of the changes in the story didn't really make sense or ring true. Still, it was very well acted, and I loved it. I watched it many times. Anyway, that was my introduction to Elizabeth Gaskell, and then I read Mary Barton and Cranford. Oh, I actually have an antique book of Cranford I meant to bring when I talked about this. I found it in an estate sale, and it's kind of water stained, but I think it's from, oh my goodness. My phone is giving me notices. Did that interrupt the filming? I don't know. I just do this on my phone. I have no idea how to do it on my computer. Anyway, I meant to show that book. Maybe I will another time. Is from the 1800s, late 1800s. Anyway, I loved Cranford. I read that. Read Wives and Daughters. I've read her Life of Charlotte Bronte. So pretty much everything she's written, I have loved. And in fact, there were 6 slots for the favorite authors. She might very well be number 6. My next maybe for favorites is Charles Dickens. And I've sort of stalled out with Dickens in that I haven't expanded my selection of books I've read by him. But I've read, the ones that I have read, I've read and reread, and I just love them. So Tale of Two Cities, David Copperfield, Great Expectations, A Christmas Carol. Last Christmas, I read A Cricket on the Hearth, which kind of started out kind of bizarre, but then it got good. I want to read more. I feel like I know a lot about him just because I've seen so many adaptations. And that movie, Oliver, oh my gosh, why the phone keeps sending me these notifications for some reason. I don't know how to shut them off. Anyway, maybe I better talk faster. So I want to read more. I tried to read Bleak House. I think it might be here somewhere. Yeah, there it is. I tried to read it and I couldn't get into it. Even though it was beautiful writing, I just wasn't in the mood at the time. But I've seen a lot of the miniseries. I saw the whole thing of Nicholas Nickleby. So I feel like I really know him, but I should read more of his. So I want to try Bleak House. I want to try Our Mutual Friend. And maybe there are others. And so one of my goals for 2020 is to read another big, thick Dickens novel. So he would be my second, just because he's been so formative. All right, and then the next one is Nathaniel Hawthorne. Oh, it was sending me another notice. Gosh, it's so annoying. Anyway, the next one is Nathaniel Hawthorne, and I have a story with him. He was another one of these people that Mrs. Vadnais tried to get me to read and just threw me in, hoping I'd swim. And she would tell you to read something, and then you'd come back in, you'd have to answer a quiz, and I'd flunk these quizzes because I wouldn't know what I had read. I remember just being completely confused by the story we had to read was Young Goodman Brown. I had no idea what was going on. I remember his wife's name was Faith, which was the first time I'd ever read that, my own name in literature. but I decided that Nathaniel Hawthorne was not for me, and I successfully avoided him for years. I didn't have to read him. I never had to read The Scarlet Letter. Didn't have to read him in college. So I avoided him until I was homeschooling with young children. And again, I was influenced by this classical education movement. And a lot of people kept saying you should read Tanglewood Tales and the Wonder Book by Nathaniel Hawthorne, which are his retellings of the Greek myths for children. That seemed to be a popular thing to do because Charles Kingsley did the same thing for his kids. But Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote these really delightful books that I happened to find in a used bookstore. And I read them out loud to my children, and they were charming. They were utterly charming. And so I thought, well, maybe I can read Nathaniel Hawthorne. Maybe I shouldn't have avoided him for so many years. So then when my kids got a little older, my oldest daughter was studying American Lit, I decided to tackle Scarlet Letter. I pre-read it, and I loved it. I couldn't believe how much I loved it. It was just brilliant. And I read it again with her. I think I've read it again since then. I tried to read it out loud to my youngest daughter, but it just didn't click for her, and so I didn't push it. But I finished reading it myself. So anyway, since then I read The House of Seven Gables, and I've read the Blithedale Romance. I love them both. The House of Seven Gables is so charming, and the Blithedale Romance is such a ironic look at idealists. And so I'm hoping in 2020 to read The Marble Fawn. That's the next one. I really like Nathaniel Hawthorne, and I'm so proud of myself for finally, in my old age, learning to appreciate him. And then my last maybe is G.K. Chesterton. He's another one that I probably discovered in my 30s. And I've read a lot of his work, but not. He wrote so much. There's a lot I haven't read either. I've read, his Father Brown Mysteries. I remember reading them as a kid. And I've read Orthodoxy. And The Everlasting Man just completely changed my understanding of history. I just love that book. That was really just a paradigm shifter for me. And I've read his biographies of St. Francis of Assisi and The Dumb Ox, his biography of St. Thomas Aquinas. And I've read The Man Who Was Thursday, which is a bizarre, absurdist kind of book, but just a romp, a real romp. And I used to subscribe to a magazine just about Chesterton. And so I've read a lot of quotes and letters he wrote and that sort of thing. So, and there's more. I could read much more. The Napoleon of Notting Hill, is that one of them? And I have What's Wrong with the World, but I tried to read that. It was so, he was a social critic of his time, which was the 19-teens and 20s, and a lot of his writing is very bound to that time. He's reacting to other critics of that time. And if you don't know the context, and you don't know what the other critic represented or what he wrote, or what they wrote, you don't quite get what Chesterton's getting at. I find it hard. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to get him. He's rollicking. And I've been reading The Picture of Dorian Gray, and there's so much use of paradox. Lord Henry Wotton uses paradox all the time, and Chesterton really does too, but Wotton uses it to obfuscate and confuse, whereas Chesterton used it to clarify, to make a point jump out at you, to really give it force. So it's funny that they're both so, I guess, wild, and Chesterton were just really artists when it came to using paradox, but one used it for good, and the other one may be evil. I'm not sure. I got to finish reading Picture of Dorian Gray. Anyway, so G.K. Chesterton, he's wonderful, and he's very quotable. And one of the quotes from him that is sort of the motto for my life is, anything worth doing is worth doing badly. And an example of that is this YouTube channel, which, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't have any followers or anything like that, except I would like to thank Johnny Keene, because he actually subscribed. So thank you very much, Johnny. Keen. I'm not sure what I should call you. I'll call you Johnny. But thank you, and I find your channel very interesting. So anyway, so those are my 4 maybes: Elizabeth Gaskell, Charles Dickens, Nathaniel Hawthorne, G.K. Chesterton, and I can't believe that I talked for 15, oh my gosh, more than 15 minutes about this. I meant to make this really short and succinct, so I apologize for that. And now I have to figure out how to say goodbye. So till we meet again, adieu.